We have a board member that is away, and two others have been delayed unexpectedly, so we need to wait for them to get here to have a quorum. So chat with your neighbor until they get here. Your patience. Hopefully it'll Joe come in.
Okay.
Good evening. I'm going to call to order this meeting of the Wendell Town Board of Commissioners and welcome all of you and thank you for your patience. We're getting a little bit of a late start. That just shows you how hard the Wendell Town Board is working for all of you. We're out all over the place doing things. We're going to be led in the Pledge of Allegiance tonight by Police Chief Bill Carter.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Chief. Our invocation tonight from the Wendell Council of Churches, we're going to hear from the Wendell Christian Church, Bill Lambeth. Thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you, Mayor
Welcome.
Gray. Just a couple of quick comments before we pray.
Certainly.
And I've had the opportunity to live in quite a few towns over the years. And I don't believe I've ever lived in a town so pleasant as Wendell. And I think that might have a little something to do with the officials here having the wisdom to ask for God's guidance. And there's a story in the Bible that many of you will know about Solomon. Solomon didn't ask for things, he asked for wisdom. And I think there might be a little bit of that going on right here in Wendell, and while we have such a pleasant town to live in. So with that, if we'll all bow in prayer. Oh Lord, we praise you and thank you, Lord, for the privilege of living in Wendell with humble and wise leaders. And Lord, this is why we've come before you tonight, to humble ourselves before you, to ask your guidance and your wisdom in all of the issues that come up before us tonight. Father, we'll give you the glory, all the credit for this wisdom. And Lord, we thank you and we praise you. And again, thank you especially for the privilege of living in a town with so many wise leaders. And we pray in your precious and holy name. Amen and amen.
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 Thank you for your kind words.
Yeah.
We appreciate it. Are there any adjustments to the agenda? Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
All right, we have a motion to approve. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Public comment. To participate in public comment period, you can sign up for public comment the night of the meeting at the podium outside the door, and you have 3 minutes to speak, or you can submit written statements via email to the town clerk by the Friday prior to the town board meeting, and it will be read into the record for the length of 3 minutes. We have one person tonight signed up, Lou House. I'm sorry, I can't read it. I'm sorry. were you here to speak on the public hearing that we're gonna have?
Yes.
Would you like to wait and speak at that time? Okay, I see now your item. Okay, thank you. All right, do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Now we're gonna move into our recognitions, reports, and presentations. And the first is a proclamation recognizing June 12th, 2023 as Women's Veterans Day. Whereas on June 12th, 1948, President Harry S. Truman signed the Women's Armed Services Integration Act, enabling women to serve as permanent regular members of the United States military services. And whereas North Carolina women have served in the American military since before we became a nation, yet they were not officially recognized as military members until 1948. And whereas women were not considered veterans and had no eligibility for benefits until women who served in World War II were given veteran status. And whereas 50 years ago, the Navy admitted the first women pilots, 41 years ago, Aileen B. Dirk became the Navy's first female admiral and the first flag-ranked woman officer in the military. 15 years ago, the Army named Anne E. Durwood the first four-star female general, and 6 years ago, Camp Lejeune granted the first three women Marines, graduated the first three women Marines to be enrolled in the School of Infantry. And whereas over 25,000 women served overseas during World War I, over 7,000 North Carolina women served during World War II, and over 265,000 American women served during the Vietnam War, including 8 who are listed on the Vietnam War Memorial Wall. Now, therefore, on behalf of the Wendell Town Board of Commissioners, I, Virginia Gray, Mayor of the Town of Wendell, do hereby proclaim June 12, 2023 as Women's Veterans Day and encourage all residents to remember this day as a salute to all women who have served or are serving in the United States military and thank them for their service. Duly proclaimed this the 12th day of June, 2023, and it's signed by me. And we have some very special guests here tonight to receive this, if they would step forward. Item 4B is the presentation of the Town of Wendell's 2022 audit report by Petway Mills and Pearson, PA.
We conducted the annual audit of the Town of Wendell. We issued an unmodified opinion on the financial statements, which is the best audit report that auditors will give. It is 3 pages long this year because our profession has adopted a new letter explaining our opinion supposedly in more detail. An unmodified opinion on an audit conducted under government auditing standards, which means we've looked at your internal control over financial reporting and compliance with provisions of laws, contracts, grant agreements, things of that nature. That's an unmodified or clean opinion. An unmodified audit opinion on your internal controls over compliance and compliance for major federal programs, since you had an American Rescue Plan that required a federal single audit. In the governmental activities of the statements, your total assets were $34.8 million, your total liabilities $23.2 million, total net assets $12.4 million, total cash was $17 million. You also had $5 million roughly invested as well as this cash. You had total revenues of $16.4 million, total expenditures of $10.9 million. The business type activities, you had total assets of $381,000, total liabilities of $381,000, and total revenues $638,000, total expenses $638,000. This fund is maintained because of the debt that you currently have and the activities that's involved with the city of Raleigh. The general fund, which is in quite good shape, total assets $23.7 million, total liabilities $2.4 million, total fund balances $21.2 million, total revenues $16.6 million, total expenditures $14.2 million. You had an unassigned fund balance, which is the discretionary fund balance that's available for the council to use as it sees fit, of $20.5 million. There's a statutory requirement that you have 80% or more of prior year expenditures available. You meet and exceed that recommendation. In our audit findings, we had no changes in accounting policies. Everything was consistently applied. We had no audit adjustments to the financial statements. That is significant. You had no changes in your use of estimates. The most sensitive disclosure dealt with your capital assets and your debt. We had no disagreements with management. Management's representation letter was signed timely and promptly. There were no uncorrected misstatements, and what those are is items that we identify that are errors that we may or may not post depending upon the dollar amount. You know, if we find a $500 error, we're not going to pick that up and post it because it's trivial. And this was your first federal compliance audit. You had the American Rescue Plan funds. We had no findings in the compliance portion. What a compliance audit is, not only we're focused on financial matters, we're focused on how you're executing your contract programmatically. Are you doing the items that are required under uniform guidance, which is the federal audit guides? And we thank you for the opportunity to conduct the audit. I will say that we have ran late with most of our audits this year because of the lack of staff. We lost most of our staff to other accounting firms, and it has been hard to retrain and establish a new staff.
Are there any questions from the board? Well, I'm going to share what you told me earlier tonight, that you're retiring to go back to college to study music. And I think that's awesome.
Thank you.
And we wish you the very best in your next adventure. That's very exciting. So good for you. Yes. And thank you to our town staff for making this so painless. We appreciate it. Garrett, roll through an entire year. Sounds like you did a great job. All right, item 4C is a capital plan presentation by our financial advisor. I'm going to start with Mr. Collins.
And all I'm going to do is turn it over to Davenport and Associates to talk.
Yep. Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm Ted Cole with Davenport. Glad to be back. This is a continuation of the discussion we've been having this spring on capital planning and a potential bond referendum. I think each of you all have a packet that was passed around. We're really planning to go through about the first 7 pages of this so that you can begin to make some decisions. And in addition to myself, John Mize is in the audience. He's with Womble Bond Dickinson, who serves as the town's bond counsel or bond attorneys, and will be available to answer questions when we get into some of the procedures and process for a referendum. So I wanted to talk off of, for beginning, page 2, if you all are there. What we've laid out for you is a schedule for projects that might be supported or funded through a general obligation bond referendum. And you'll see we broke it into what we're calling 2 questions for now. Ultimately, you all will be required to determine what are the questions that you would want to ask the voters, and what amount do you want to include in each question. So we have broken it down preliminarily into question 1, which is related to transportation projects. And you'll see that there are a number of projects identified, Wendell Falls Parkway, Eagle Rock very specifically, and then other transportation plan road improvements more generically. The total transportation package on line 7 could be approximately $12 million. And you'll notice that across the top we have fiscal years laid out, fiscal years 24, which is the year we're about to go into, through fiscal year 28. And you can see how much of that 12 million is attributable to each project. And we've also included on line 6 what we're calling a referendum contingency. The idea there being that some of these projects will not be bid or constructed out until 26, 27, or 28, with inflation just not sure which direction that will go. In talking with staff, we felt like it might be appropriate to add some cushion or contingency to that number. So that's how we've landed at a $12 million amount for a potential transportation referendum question. It's $10 million of projects, but there's $2 million of, I'll call it a contingency. And that ultimately will be y'all's discretion, right? What amount do you want to go forward with, if any, if you decide to move forward? What amount would you want to attribute to any particular bond question? And you'll see that these are spaced out over time. In the middle of the page, question 2 is picking up what we're calling Parks and Rec projects. So we got Wendell Athletic Field Complex, Main Street Greenway, Buffalo Creek Greenway, and a new recreation center. Same approach. We've included a contingency of about $2 million there. So all of those Parks and Rec projects together with the contingency is about $38 million. So under this approach, you would potentially be asking 2 questions, 12 and 38 million respectively for transportation, Parks and Rec, a grand total of what could be 50 million that would be requested. And you'll see at the bottom, we've anticipated, based on the timing of these projects, 3 bond issues. If there's a successful referendum, an issuance in 2025, and we've kind of color-coded that. That's largely picking up Parks and Rec projects, and really a big chunk of that is the Wendell Athletic Field Complex. So a 2025 bond issue, followed by a smaller issue in 26, which is the early projects for transportation, and then a larger bond issue in 27, which picks up the remaining projects, both transportation and Parks and Rec. If you were to have a successful referendum, you don't have to issue it all at once. You can issue it as needed, as projects are ready to go. The Local Government Commission would encourage you to do it that way. That's the way they like to see it. When a referendum is approved, you have an initial 7 years to issue the debt from the date of the referendum. And oftentimes you can get a 3-year extension, but you've got to go to the LGC to get that 3-year extension. So somewhere between 7 and perhaps up to 10 years to actually issue the debt. When we start talking about the impacts of this on your budget, remember, we've got these 3 bond issues in the plan, 25, 26, and 27. And when we issue that debt, we issue it over 20 years, fixed rate, very, very straightforward approach that the Local Government Commission would advocate for. And if you issue the bonds in 25, the payments start in 26. If you issue in 26, the payments start in 27, and so forth. Okay? So that's a key part of this discussion tonight, is what could be 50 million of general obligation bonds. Any questions on that? Okay. If you go to page 3, within the bigger context of a capital improvement plan, which includes the general obligation bonds, but it includes many other things. And when you're looking at this page 3, the top half of the page through line 10 are the projects that are on the CIP. And we talked a fair amount about this at the retreat, and I know you all had some discussions with staff. We're capturing stormwater projects on line 1. You can see by year what's in the CIP for stormwater. We're capturing transportation projects, what I'll call general CIP transportation on line 3, plus the potential GO bond projects on line 4. We're capturing what we're calling the general town capital projects, and that's Parks and Rec and other things. So when you push everything together over this 5-year period, 24 through 28, we're talking about capital projects that could be in the range of about $98 million. Now, that is not all expected to be funded with debt. You're going to see here in a moment what's in the plan to be funded with debt is a little more than half, $56.5 million. And that includes the GO bonds if they're approved. So again, over the 5-year period, about $98 million is in the CIP. That will obviously get revisited every year. You all will decide about priorities, what's become, a higher priority, what might be able to shift back. You'll be refining projects and amounts, but from a planning perspective, that's what we're working with. And then the bottom half of this page lays out where are the dollars coming from in any given year to fund the projects for those years. And there's a number of outside funding sources and grants that are detailed in the back. I think we've talked about those. Those are coming from different places that staff has identified. We've got stormwater revenues. We've got pay-as-you-go and reserve funding for transportation and general projects. And then we've got debt. Largely the debt component is the potential GO bonds. Again, that's $50 million. And we have about a $6.5 million installment purchase contract penciled in, much like what you did when you funded your new town hall. So in a very high level, the total projects across line 10 match the total uses of funding across line 23. So we have a CIP and we have it funded on paper. Okay? Any questions on that page? All right, so we then go to page 4 and we lay out graphically, most of this discussion will be in that upper left graph where we're showing what the debt profile of the town would look like as this CIP is funded the way it's been laid out on the prior page. You're starting with some debt on the books today that you've issued. That is largely made up of the debt for the new town hall. That's the lion's share of your existing debt. And then we're just sort of incrementally layering in the new debt in accordance with the CIP, starting with that $6.5 million. And I need what was that project? $6.5 million. Pardon? That's for the public works yard. Thank you. That's the $6.5 million. That would not be voted. That would be an installment financing. And then we start layering in the GO bonds in 25, 26, and 27. So that upper left chart kind of shows you the progression of what your debt profile would look like. And under this plan, you would sort of hit the peak, the new peak of your debt payments in fiscal year 2028. If everything is issued in accordance with what the CIP says. That's where you would hit your new peak, and then you would start to see your annual debt payments come down. That's also about the time you'd start talking about your next 5-year CIP, right? So it's sort of a never-ending or a continual process. So that's the debt component of the CIP summarized on page 4. We go to page 5. We are looking at some particular debt ratios and policies that are in place. The red lines indicate the policy levels, so I'm going to look at the top left. The key to that ratio, which is a measure of how quickly you're paying your debt back, it's called the 10-year payout. You want your green bars to be above the red line. Higher is better in this case. It means more debt is being paid back more quickly, which is generally a good thing. And your policy, you're projected to remain in compliance with your policy, maybe a tad below it, very marginally below it in 27, but I'm going to call it compliance and then some. Debt to assessed value on the right, that's debt outstanding in any given year as a percent of your tax base. The red line is at 2.5%. That establishes an upper limit, and you'll see that over this plan, we're projected to have about 3 years where you could be out of compliance. Now, I will tell you, throughout this analysis, we have not made any assumptions about what revaluation impacts might be on your tax base. We have started with the FY24 tax base, which is the year you budgeted for, and then we are growing the tax base from fiscal years 25 through 28 at 10% per year. And that has been trying to reflect just the natural growth, building permit driven type of growth that's going on in the town, not necessarily saying, hey, we're going to see a big bump in one year or another tied to a reval. And then beyond 2028, it's 5% a year. So in terms of tax base growth, 10% a year for fiscal years 25, 26, 27, and 28. And I think that is supported by historical performance. And then beyond 29 and beyond at 5% a year. So when you're looking at that debt to assessed value, there is certainly growth in the assessed value, but a significant revaluation growth would only help. But we are projected to be over that policy potentially for about 3 years. And the key to that is, look, time will tell what actually happens with assessed value growth. You always have an opportunity with debt and capital projects to reassess your plan. And you also always have an opportunity to make an exception to your policy if you determine that, hey, we've got real needs, we got things that we really want to do, and while we might be out of compliance with our policy for a few years, we are able to make that exception if you choose, whether it's this board or a subsequent board. And at the bottom is debt service to expenditures. This one, we've got a potential for more of a compliance issue if this plan moves forward as projected and if we don't see budget growth beyond the tax base growth. The policy says not to exceed 15. You can see we get there pretty quickly, and we're getting into the 30 to 35% range based on the debt plan that's supporting the CIP. Again, like the prior ratio, but maybe even more so, just something that you're going to need to have to watch if the referendum is approved, and continue to manage that. You're a growing community. What we tend to see in the capital markets working with local governments is those that are growing most oftentimes have to rely on debt more heavily to keep up with the growth and meet the capital needs, and as a result tend to be on the higher end of these debt ratios. So again, just something that needs to be watched and monitored. And then really one of the key slides tonight is page 6, and I realize, yeah, oh, I'm sorry.
Can I ask you, so the policy that you're citing is a board policy of 40%, which is something the board came up with. Can you talk about policies you've seen in other communities and whether or not
Yeah, the policy on that one, if you're talking about debt service to expenditures, the policy is 15%.
Okay.
But we're projecting with the CIP funding that we talked about, and the debt that's being potentially issued, we're projecting to get up to the 35%, so a multiple of your policy.
Right. And then can you talk about the baselines of what the LGC looks for and what your thoughts on what the LGC's thoughts would be?
You know, in fact, we're talking to the Local Government Commission tomorrow to let them know that a potential referendum application may be coming their way. We'll talk about the schedule next. And so they'll have an opportunity, staff will, this is just with the staff, not the commission itself, to weigh in on that. But, I mean, they'll acknowledge that that's getting on the high end of what they would see. But I think they'll also, I would hope, would acknowledge, like what I just spoke to, is that growing communities tend to have to rely on debt to meet their capital needs as opposed to being able to pay cash for everything. They tend to rely on debt to keep up and to get ahead of those needs. You know, time will tell how your budget actually grows. We've been conservative, I believe, in the growth assumptions that we've used and working with staff on that. But I would expect them to flag that as a discussion item, and we'll have more feedback to share with you all at your next meeting on what LGC staff had to say.
Thank you, sir.
Okay? All right. So if we go to page 6, this is where we're trying to give you all some perspective on the affordability of this capital plan. And we've looked at a few different scenarios, and I know there's a lot going on this page, but if we could focus, actually let's look at the far right. What's in the blue columns I and J, it says standalone GO bond analysis. This analysis, or this scenario, is looking at just the $50 million by itself. Forget about the $98 million of capital projects. The total CIP is $98. We're looking at just the $50 million issued over those 3 periods, 25, 26, and 27. When we model that up, and we are using an interest rate, when we model that, that is provided to us by the Local Government Commission, and it's called their safe harbor rate. What that means and what that's tied to is ultimately the Local Government Commission has to accept and approve your application to hold a GO bond. The voters obviously have to vote on the bonds, but the Local Government Commission has to accept and approve a application for GO bonds. Historically, when you've submitted your application in July, they've taken it to the commission and they've approved it before the referendum. Just saying, you have a good application, it's good to go, have your vote, and let us know what happens, essentially. What they've started doing now is saying, rather than approving or considering approving your application before the referendum, they're going to do it after. So it might happen in December or January. You've already had your vote. This is a new policy that they've established. And so because they're not approving your application until after the vote, they have provided guidance to local governments that says you should be using certain assumptions in modeling your debt, the GOs that you want to issue, and communicating that with your community. This is across the board. And so they've provided what we're calling safe harbor assumptions. If we use these assumptions that they provide us, we should not have any issue with their approval next December or January. Now, if the voters don't approve it, LGC has nothing to approve. If the voters approve it in November, the LGC has to take this up in December or January. If we've used the safe harbor assumptions, we should have no issue with their approval. And they're, as you might expect, very conservative assumptions. And so when we model, I'm back to columns I and J, when we model just the GO bonds by themselves, and remember, they're issued in over 3 years, Down under tax rate, keep in mind, 1 penny on your tax rate today, I'm going to round up slightly, generates about $140,000. 1 penny on your tax rate, about $140,000. When you're issuing that $50 million over what might be a 3-year period, we are calculating that in fiscal year 26, you would need the equivalent of about 6.7 pennies on the tax rate to service that first issuance. And then in fiscal 27, you need another 2.5 pennies to service the first 2 issuances. And then finally in fiscal 28, you need the equivalent of another about 16.5 pennies that would be needed to service the full 50 million. And so over that 3-year period, using those safe harbor assumptions and the CIP timing, we have about the equivalent of 26 pennies on the tax rate. Remember, a penny right now generates about 138,000. So about 26 pennies on the tax rate, but it's not all done at once. It's done over a 3-year period. Right below that, where you see the 17.16 pennies, is an alternative way that we've calculated that you could achieve the same thing. And what we're saying there is, rather than piecemeal it over a 3-year period, you could do a one-time adjustment in 25. That's the next budget you'll be working on. You have a referendum in November. If it's approved, you're going to be working on your 25 budget. And if everything were approved and you feel good about your plan, you could do a one-time adjustment on the rate of the equivalent of 17 pennies to fully fund the CIP. So the 26 pennies, 25.9 pennies, or 17 pennies are funding the same CIP. It's just, do you want to do it over time and kind of grow into it, or do you want to establish enough new revenue up front and in 25 and you get to the same place? Now, I will tell you, later on, you could start reducing that tax rate because remember, your debt hits a peak and then it starts to come back down. And that's demonstrated to you all in this particular case, beginning back on page 26. But for the purposes of the Local Government Commission and for the referendum discussions, we need to measure what is the potential impact when this new debt comes on under the plan you have. Okay? So that's a very simple, compartmentalized analysis of just the GOs by themselves. When you look at the left-hand side of this page in the green, we're pulling in all those other projects that you have and other sources of funding that you have as well, right? You're dedicating certain transportation revenues to the plan. You're dedicating sales tax to the plan. These other revenues are flowing through your budget for capital. And so the full 98 million, if you're looking under columns C and D, it says total CIP with the GO bonds. Same setup over about a 3-year period. We're solving to get to about a 30 cent impact, or the equivalent of, you got to be generating about $5.8 million to support that total CIP. That happens over time under column C. Alternatively, you could get it done in 2025 with the equivalent of about 14 pennies. They're just 2 different ways to fund that program. When we strip out the GO bonds in the middle, it's a much more manageable CIP. It's the equivalent of about 4 pennies. The GOs are a big driver to what's going on here. And then columns G and H, show you what it would be if you had the GOs plus the non-GO part of your CIP. Again, we're around 26 cents, the same analysis as the far right, or up front, it would be about 12.5 pennies. So there are a number of ways that you might ultimately get to funding this program whether it's just the 50 million of GOs or the full 98 million of projects, you and subsequent boards will consider, do we want to just adjust the budget year by year to see how things are trending, how tax base is growing, what the interest rate environment is, or if there's a successful referendum, do we want to establish a tax rate up front at one time and sort of set it and move forward. And you will have those decisions to make. You don't need to make those decisions up front. I think where that will become important is if you decide to move this process forward, as you're communicating with the community about what is the impact, what is the plan to bring on these projects and bring the budget to a level that will support that new debt service. I know it's a lot of information on that page 6. So I guess, any questions or comments?
Real quick one, and you may have already said this, so just re-say it for me, but can you help me just a real high-level understanding of why the, I guess maybe like final 3 lines, so around the totals and equivalent budget impacts in columns I and J are not the same as the numbers in G and H?
Yes. I and J, remember, the only thing going in that scenario is the GO bond debt service. Nothing else is happening, right? We have no other revenues and no other projects. But when you get to G and H, it's the full, it's the full CIP, okay? It's the full 98 million, and there are other revenues that are flowing through the model at that point that are available for the plan, not necessarily dedicated to any one thing. And as a result, you can do more with an upfront, you can do an upfront increase at a lower level than you could if you didn't have those other revenues flowing through the model. It's not necessarily intuitive, but the model bears it out. You're funding a larger CIP with other projects, but you also have other revenues, and as a result, an upfront impact can be lower with the total CIP leveraging some of those other revenues.
Okay, thank you.
Okay?
Can you, easy example of other revenues when you say other revenues?
Sure. We are talking about other dollars that are already dedicated to your capital plan. Just give me a moment. And I'm talking about things like sales tax revenue, stormwater revenue, on the transportation side, we have PAL bill revenue, motor vehicle fees. So there's, depending on which projects are being funded, you all already have, besides just tax revenue, you have other revenues that are flowing through this CIP that you already currently budget, and the expectation is that you will be able to continue to budget.
A good example is we're paying debt service on existing debt now. That amount that we pay each year goes down. That money's still in our budget and can be available for going towards new debt, and that increases over time. So when you look out a 20-year issuance, one debt ends and there's other capital there. And so when you break that out over the whole CIP, that's why that number's lower than if you just look at the GO and fund it all with new debt and not consider the rest. That number's going to be higher. Does that make more sense now? But yeah, it's any other revenue that the town gets that's not going towards operations, existing debt service, and personnel.
I'm hoping that there's one person sitting out there that's still paying attention, because I can tell you that it would probably be very dreadful to listen to this without the benefit of the handout that we have here, so, bear with us.
Okay. The slide I wanted to wrap up on page 7, just lays out the next steps associated with this process, beginning with this evening, which is, looking for a determination about proceeding with proceedings for the authorization of the bonds, the amount and the purpose. And you'll see on the right-hand side under the key board actions, what are we looking for? And John Mize may be able to help answer any questions you might have in this section in particular, but preliminary guidance on the referendum questions. Remember, we've preliminarily set it up as 2 questions. And the amounts, that's just guidance. We'll need formal action or formal direction at the June 26th meeting, where there will be a preliminary findings resolution that you all would consider. And at that point, the questions themselves and the not to exceed amounts by question would have to be finalized. You can always bring the amount down, but you can't go up later. So that's why we specifically laid out for June 26th the questions themselves, 1, 2, what have you, and then the not to exceed dollar amount that's associated with each question. From there, there's a local government commission application that is filed. The local government commission staff would give us notification that they have accepted the application, but again, the approval would not happen under their new guidelines until after the referendum. And then from there, you'll see there's an action in July talking about what's called a bond order, a sworn statement of debt, and other disclosures that have to be certified. And then action in August. You'll be holding a public hearing regarding the bond orders. Another resolution for you all to consider, and this is requirements that's universal for anybody going through a referendum process. So by the middle of August, you will have done what you would need to do in order to hold a referendum in November, according to this schedule.
Well, I know that tonight we're looking for direction on whether or not to proceed. I guess I would just say that what's laid out here, and I look forward to sharing what we can see in front of us with anybody who's interested. I know everybody else will as well. To Commissioner Deloach's point, it's probably really dense to listen to. But the bottom line is, this is an opportunity to make, for us as a community, everybody voting in an election that everybody gets to vote in, to decide whether or not to make some big investments to keep up with the growth that's happening in town. I know that if I found out tomorrow that I was having quadruplets, I'd probably be going to take out a pretty big loan, maybe one that was more than I was initially comfortable with, to have a bigger house and be ready to facilitate that growth in my family. I think that's what's happening in Wendell. I think it is worth giving Wendell an opportunity to decide whether or not we want to take a bigger bite into meeting the demand for services, infrastructure. This is really about parks and transportation. I think we've got a big need for them. We've got a lot of folks here that want to use what we've got and want more than what we've got, so I think it's up to y'all. I'm happy with us moving forward with giving y'all an opportunity to decide whether or not this is something you want to do with ultimately your tax dollars in your town.
I would caution my young Jedi colleague that this is a big, let me rephrase that this is a decision that, these are some projects that are here. The projects that we're talking about have long been discussed. We voted to put them in capital plans 5 years ago. We voted to keep them in capital plans 4 years ago. We did it again 3 years ago. In every budget, we've honored every commitment that we've made on our capital plans going back 3 years now. Or I can honestly say, if we said we were going to do it in capital, it's been done. I feel like this is about buy-in in the future of Wendell. We've vetted and put out these projects. We've talked about these projects. Each of these projects have been, let's see, charretted, storyboard, waterboard, all the different types of various community engagement you could get on, and then planned and consulted on. There's not a single one of them that there's not another one of these books just about that project. I think this is about the community deciding, hey, we've had those things on the list. Do y'all really want to get serious about it and do it? And can we provide ourselves flexibility in when and how we go with these projects? So if we find an opportunity to move on something quickly, we know that we have the ability to have the funds to do it tomorrow. I appreciate the presentation. It's a lot. You're talking to, that's a lot. It's a lot. But it is also a lot that has been vetted through every Citizen Advisory Board, every public way that we could think of. I appreciate y'all's work on this, and I certainly am comfortable with moving forward.
Anyone else?
My concern is, of course, how much are the taxes gonna go up for families on fixed incomes and retired people in town? So that's my concern. What is the actual amount per year they're gonna have to go pay on their property taxes? I haven't really heard. You know, what is that amount? How much is it gonna go up per year? You know, can they afford to still live here in town?
So the way that I feel I had a very similar question, if you don't mind. I had a very similar question and went down the road of trying to figure that out. And so like this report shows that if you wanted to pay for it all in year one, here's what you'd raise taxes to do. And I think that's fine. I think there's some other ways to get at that number. I think there's a way to do kind of a hybrid of both of what we're saying, where the tax rate goes up based on what voters have said we want you to raise the rate to this. And then as projects come up, we issue those bonds, they come up together. The problem with trying to determine what is someone going to be able to afford this, or what is it going to go up on them is, you know as well as I, you're in that business, would you rather buy an HVAC unit in 2017 or in 2023? Well, the price of that HVAC unit is twice what it was in 2017. If you'd have known then what you know now, you could buy all of them, you could. So there's a natural, we're not in control of Washington, but there seems to be a steady increase in all sorts of prices. That's why I refer to this as giving ourselves the ability to honor the plan, because we're putting the money in our pocketbook. If we get to the point of saying it's time to build this, and we say that's not a good project, money's not right, and it's going to make taxes go up by X, Y, or Z, we still have the authority to say, you know what, we're not going to take that issuance. We're not going to do it. But what it does give us is, hey, community, instead of doing this 1 year at a time, one budget season at a time, where we get to show you our cash and show you our debt and show you our affordability, and every year we're showing you that we have 98% affordability, we get to say one time, hey, we're going to show you our math, we're going to show you our work, we're going to show you what the plan is. Everyone seems to be bought into this plan. That will then allow the town to move at a pace that is best for the taxpayer, by the town saying, okay, now Mark says it's time to move on the Greenway, and we're going to hold on the event center, or it's time to build the gymnasium because we need to build the gymnasium, instead of, oh, no, we didn't put it in last year's budget, we have to wait till next year to have that conversation. I see it as a flexibility thing. We've already committed in multiple votes to the projects and the cost of them. This is a way of us honoring that and saying, all right, folks, what do y'all think about it? This is the best we can come up with. What do you think? And that was just I went way down a rabbit hole the other night, Phil, trying to figure that out, and so I wanted to share.
Oh, yeah.
That's where I kind of landed on it, was that it's hard to figure out because the price is going up every single day. Thank you.
I'll just say for me, it's, big needs require big plans, and we've done certainly quite a bit of that already. Big plans require big dollars, and the dollar piece is something that I think that we can gauge on the ballot, and the desire of the voters, which gives us the ability and the flexibility. This is not, as I say, couch cushion money by any means. It's a big deal. But, you know, I feel like we have the plan in place. We need to take it to the voters to gauge the desire. So then we can move forward, with things that are in those big plans. So I support it.
I'm very much in favor of letting voters decide things. I like the idea of that, and these reflect the two things that I bet you every one of us on this board hear about from the citizens the most: roads and parks, and park programming, and the ability to provide things that we just can't do right now, you know, so, and the roads. I don't think we even need to say anything more about that. So those are the things we constantly hear. And, you know, we're at a point now where we can't make some of the improvements that we need without taking a big bite. We can't do that. So I like the idea of the citizens. If they choose no, then they'll know why we don't have ability to do more with the roads and parks beyond our normal ability, you know. So I do like that. I do like that. That pleases me. Any other questions?
And the, I was
I was
gonna
just gonna say, as far as information availability, I know that's a big piece of what we encourage, as a board. And again, you know, I know it was a little tough to sit through without slides and that kind of thing. At what point do we, you know, is the availability there for what we're talking about?
Could we have the slides present at our next meeting when we discuss this, in 2 weeks?
I'll email them to you after the meeting.
Okay.
But for the public, so that when the next time there's a presentation, can we make sure that these slides are on that screen so that everybody can
That's
see
what I
what we're talking about?
Have some
Yeah,
things.
if there's anything that you'd like us to bring up on that screen, we have the PDF minimized behind the presentation right now. So if there's a particular page that you want to see right now.
I don't see any eyes in the audience that are so desperate to see
Alright.
the slides. that
Really
I think everyone's now saying, I heard it, I remember it, it was great, I think I'm in favor of it. I was just for the future, that way they don't have to.
I think y'all know we're very transparent with our numbers, and we're more than happy to provide any spreadsheets or data. So when we go through a referendum process, bond council and our council will be telling y'all what we as a town can do and say and provide and legally, and then what citizens can say. And so there's always a cautionary tale on what we put out in what manner, so that we are not supporting or opposing as an organization. There's a legal standard that we have to follow. I'm not the attorney, they'll give you advice on that. So
Can we,
we're just, I'm sorry.
I was interrupting you, but at our next meeting, can we provide what we're legally able to provide in our agenda packet, and maybe some draft condensed form of that on the screen, so people can see more of what's going on? Is that possible that we could do?
Bond
so they
counsel
can
says
see-
yes on his head nodding, so
Okay,
yes.
that'd be
ma'am.
great, thank you. So everyone can have something to follow along while we're talking.
Yeah, and I will say, at the retreat, I said the same thing. You know, the color coding and the layout and the explanation, was top-notch, so,
Thank
made
you.
it very easy to follow, so.
I think all of this is information that is education,
Yeah.
not advocation. I don't think there's anything in this presentation that you couldn't share.
Yeah.
Going forward, if you decide to move forward and you're in the community, that's where you've got to walk a line about educating the citizens versus advocating for or against.
Well, we rely on you all to guide us in that, when that
And
time comes.
remember, the questions are independent of one another. The people will have an opportunity to weigh in on both, and if one passes and the other doesn't, you know, that gives you direction. If they both pass, obviously, you know, you have that direction. So, the questions will be important. What are the questions? And you can't commingle certain projects into a single question. There are,
If I may, I just want to clarify to make sure that staff brings back to the board for the preliminary findings resolution on June 26th. If you look at page 7, the next steps, if we bring back the resolution that has 2 questions, one for 12 million for transportation, one for 38 million for parks and recreation, is that what we're hearing that the board wants us to do for the next meeting?
Yes,
Okay. And
we just want to make sure that the slides are,
you're not making a decision tonight, you're just asking what the questions are and the amounts to move forward,
but
bring to you next week.
we don't actually get to decide what the questions are, right? Like, that's, there's 2 questions because there's gonna be 2 questions. We can't make it 1 question even if we wanted to. So there's 2 questions coming back to us, and the total is what the math is, so yeah, that would be my answer. Yes.
That's right. There's this concept of log rolling. You can't log roll questions under the statute. There's individual purposes, so you've got to have a separate Parks and Rec question, a separate transportation question. You can't just say, public projects or something like that.
Thank you, yeah. So it sounds like you're gonna bring back 2 questions, and then it'll be right about 50 million. Thank you.
Okay,
Just so you have everything you need?
I think we did. Yeah.
Okay. Thank y'all. Going to move into our public hearings now. Item 5A is a public hearing to annex A2301 and rezone CD 21-11, approximately 161.654 acres from residential agriculture to rural residential to residential 7 conditional district to create Martin Pond residential subdivision. Mr. Coates.
Yep, good evening, Mayor and board members. Before you tonight is a public hearing to annex and rezone, as the mayor mentioned, of the 161 acres. Applications have been received for the annexation and rezoning for the 161 acres located off Martin Pond Road near the intersection with Wendell Falls Parkway. The intent is to create a 524 lot residential development comprised of a mixture of single family and townhome lots. Impacts to town services: the proposed annexation would require services from the town's police, public works, and parks and rec departments if annexed and developed. Secondary service impacts will be incurred by other town departments that support operational, such as planning and finance. The property is already served by the local fire district. Water and sewer are readily available near to the property and provided by our service agreement through the City of Raleigh Utilities Department. Specific impacts are dependent on the use, density, and design of development, which we'll go over here the next few slides. The project contains roughly 26 parcels. It's from residential, agricultural, and rural residential to R7 conditional district. We'll go over the conditions in a moment. The land is currently in our ETJ, and the applicant is here tonight to answer any questions as well. Zoning map, you can see the area designated in dark brown are the parcels included in tonight's request. The area that you see in orange that's labeled as PUD 15-1 is the Wendell Falls community. You can see phases 10 and 11 border this area of the request. The area to the south, you'll see, is still residential agricultural zoning, and there are a project under construction, apartments at the intersection of Martin Pond and Wendell Falls Parkway, where there's Neuse River Vets recently opened, and some other parcels and apartments and townhomes. Overall site plan: Wendell Falls is located to the west of the majority of the site. There are 2 stub connections to Wendell Falls. The amenity center is located in the middle of the project, which includes pool, clubhouse, volleyball courts. There's 3 playgrounds. There are 2 properties that are located, would be surrounded by this development, and they're highlighted there at kind of in the southeastern corner. And then you can see Martin Pond Road is on the eastern side. Lot dimensions for R7: minimum lot width is 24 feet for a single family, 16 for a townhome. They're providing 40 and 50 foot single family lots, 22 foot lots for townhomes. Front setback, they're meeting our ordinance requirements, same with side and rear setbacks. They're providing a little more of a corner setback and 20 feet between townhomes as well. The applicant's proposal does meet all of our requirements for R7 districts. Going to go over some zoning conditions. It's going to take me a few minutes. We'll go over each one. Condition 1, valley curbs shall be used throughout the entirety of the community. That's similar to Wendell Falls and some other developments. We allow valley curbs, and they're asking to use it throughout the community. The amenity area shall be constructed prior to the release of the 155th certificate of occupancy for the homes. You can see minimum lot size, single family, for a 40-foot wide lot. The lot size is 3,500 square feet. For a townhome, it's a minimum 2,200 square feet. Development shall allow a maximum of 524 units with a maximum of 45% townhomes. They're roughly around 35% currently with their site plan. Anti-monotony: in order to promote a variation in home appearance, no single-family front facade shall be duplicated for 3 lots in a row or directly across the street. For corner lots, this shall apply to the lots diagonally across the intersection. This is a very common zoning condition that we've been seeing, and it does provide that anti-monotony for streetscape. Garage doors shall either contain windows or carriage-style adornments. The use of vinyl siding shall be prohibited except for trim elements of the dwelling unit facade. Condition 8, the community will have a homeowners association. The HOA will be responsible for the community's amenities and open space, as well as the townhome's roofs, yard maintenance, and pest control. UDO
Just to be clear on that one real quick, and if you'd rather me do this at the end.
No, go ahead.
Does that mean yard maintenance and pest control at the townhomes or
Yes.
everywhere? Okay,
Just for the townhomes. Yep.
thank you.
And exterior also to include the roof, or just the roof?
I'll let the developer answer that question.
Cool.
UDO Section 5, front-loaded single-family lot shall have a minimum allowed lot width of 40 feet, but could go down to 32 in a cul-de-sac. UDO Section 10, multifamily dwellings limited to townhomes only shall be a permitted use in R7. Section 11, maximum block length shall exceed 800 feet on Street F as necessary to preserve environmental features. Foundations related to Condition 12, top of slab shall be elevated a minimum of 8 inches above finished grade. Finished grade shall fall a minimum of 6 inches within the first 10 feet away from the structure to ensure positive drainage. Foundations 12-inch or greater shall be treated with masonry on the front and street-facing sides. Otherwise, foundations shall be parged and painted for both single-family and townhomes.
Brian, is that a different version of that condition than we've seen previously? The 8 inches seems to be a number, I remember seeing 12 inches, I remember seeing 10, I don't remember seeing 8 previous.
Yeah, it's kind of a mixture of 2 different conditions that they put into one, but yeah.
Would your opinion be that that complies with what I refer to as the Boyette rule?
Correct, yes.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. The development shall provide a 20-foot type B buffer around the entire perimeter, except where the street stubs are provided and where the perimeter is within a utility easement. Condition 14, existing vegetation shall be used as the perimeter buffer. Where existing vegetation does not meet the type B buffer requirements, the buffer shall be supplemented to meet the UDO requirements. Condition 15, the development will have the following amenities: 3 IPEMA certified playgrounds, a volleyball court, dog park, clubhouse, and pool, and amenities shall be maintained by the HOA. Condition 16, Martin Pond Road at full build-out shows a 3-lane undivided cross-section. They'll utilize a 10-foot multi-use path and a bike lane for their portion of the improvements. A 6-foot sidewalk is required. Staff and planning board requested that multi-use path for connectivity in the future. Condition 17, development shall provide a 20-foot enhanced gateway overlay buffer along the development frontage on Martin Pond Road. The enhanced gateway overlay buffer shall consist of 1 canopy tree per 20 feet and 1 shrub per 5. So it's a more dense planning than our requirements along Martin Pond. Existing vegetation is to remain undisturbed along Martin Pond in the gateway overlay buffer. Supplemental planting shall be required where existing vegetation does not meet the minimum requirements of the buffer. A landscape easement is proposed for maintenance and protection of the vegetation within the gateway buffer. Condition 19, at least 1 window per floor on each side of each unit shall be provided. And then condition 20, a 22-foot paved access will be provided to the property identified as the pin there. The alley will be used as a turnaround if warranted. That is to a property internal to the site. Public utilities, Development of the site will require connection to city water and sewer. Environmental, the applicant will need to obtain stormwater, sedimentation, erosion control permits from Wake County Environmental Services before any site work can commence. The proposed development plan will need to meet the requirements of the UDO. Wake County does provide stormwater, sedimentation, erosion control services for the town. Current plans show 8 stormwater control measures for roughly throughout the 161 acres. Buffers, UDO does require a 20-foot type B since the R7 zoning use is more intense than the adjacent existing single-family residential uses. The proposed development plan does include that 20-foot buffer on the perimeter of the project as noted in condition 13. And then we just went over the buffers are also required for that gateway overlay, which is more dense than our requirements. Open space, UDO requires 1,750 square feet of open space per single-family home and 1,000 for each townhome unit. Of that, 75% of the required open space be passive, 25% be improved, which a third of that needs to be considered active. The proposed development plan of 524 units needs to have a minimum roughly 18 acres of open space, the applicant's providing 60. The active portions include pool, amenity center, dog park, 3 playgrounds, and a volleyball court. Streams and wetlands, the current development plan does show the locations of streams and wetlands. The development plan shows the required 50-foot noose riparian buffer, which are measured from the top of the stream bank. Transportation, UDO does require for a project of this size, it exceeds 100 peak hour trips, a TIA is required. TIA, you can see here on the screen of the finalized one from NCDOT, does show a left turn lane on northbound Martin Pond into site drives 1 and 3. There's also 3 full site driveways for ingress and egress from the development. And then there's a right turn lane on southbound Martin Pond Road onto Wendell Falls Parkway that's required. The project does have 2 stub connections to Wendell Falls, and we'll go over that in a little more detail in this next slide. Our arterial and collector street plan contains a 2-lane collector road from Wendell Valley Boulevard to Martin Pond Road. The green line on the map is roughly what's in our transportation plan. That green line is just, we need a collector in that area. The red portion that you see that's constructed, that says constructed as part of Wendell Falls Phase 10 and to be constructed as part of Wendell Falls Phase 11, that's the portion of the collector that Wendell Falls included in their project. As you see on there, the green line goes right through Wheat Drive, which is a NCDOT 2-lane, roughly 18 feet of pavement. When the development plan came in for review, we worked with the applicant, the engineer, to get the red line that you see, the rim east of Wendell Falls, down to Martin Pond Road. So there will be a continuous, if this development is approved, there will be a continuous collector road from Martin Pond through this development and through Wendell Falls phases 10 and 11 to Wendell Valley Boulevard, which provides a parallel route instead of all traffic going down and using Wendell Falls Parkway. Also, where the roadway ends there, where this collector ends at Martin Pond in their development, there is just a few parcels between there and getting it over to Eagle Rock Road. And so having a continuous parallel route from Jake May to Wendell Valley Boulevard would provide a great connectivity for a lot of different neighborhoods in the east-west connector beyond Wendell Falls Parkway. So the developer did work with us on getting that collector rerouted. Having it go through Wheat Drive and end in a residential neighborhood like that, collectors, we prefer they not have driveways on them, that they're alley loaded and that traffic can flow and have that connectivity. So the red line you see is what Wendell Falls is currently constructing and has built part of it, and what this development would provide, getting that connection from Martin Pond to Wendell Valley Boulevard. Local streets, there's 3 site access drives on Martin Pond Road. Streets A and E are those modified collector roads and have a 61-foot right-of-way. Street P is a minor collector and has that 67-foot right-of-way, which aligns with other collectors such as Piney Falls in Wendell Falls, Big Falls, and Taylor Road. The proposed local streets do meet the town standards and have a 52-foot right-of-way. There are two parcels that we identified that are in the center of the project. The plan shows access for the Fleischhauer property through a driveway to Street A. The applicant is providing a wider access than required for their property. Also, there's a Faulkner property that is currently landlocked, and the developer is providing a 20-foot easement for that property as well. And so that parcel will no longer be landlocked and will have access to Martin Pond Road.
So, no access at all currently? No
Currently.
easement, nothing?
No, nothing. There are 48 parking spaces spread across 3 mail kiosk areas and also 32 parking spaces at the amenity center. Phasing for the project shows 11 phases. The playground and clubhouse are to be built prior to the final CO in Phase 4. The pool and amenity center are included in Phase 1. Playgrounds, volleyball are included in Phase 3, and then there's also a playground in Phase 11 as well. And so a variety of amenities at different times and some requirements to construct those before certain COs or certain phases. Comp plan classifies this area as medium residential 2, which is roughly 4 to 8 dwelling units per acre, has improved open space in the forms of greens, pocket parks, neighborhood parks as well, greenway trails, and interconnectivity. The proposed project meets those characteristics in medium residential 2 as it relates to uses, street patterns, street types, connectivity, and open space. This medium residential 2 classification in that area is the majority of the residential components. It's the same classification as Wendell Falls. Their density is similar to Wendell Falls in unit type as well. Moderate density comprised of single-family or attached single-family such as townhomes, duplexes. This project is made up of single-family and townhomes. Density of the neighborhood, a comp plan allows 4 to 8. They're proposing 3.31 at this time. Improved open spaces are in the form of pocket neighborhood parks. The proposed development also has three playgrounds, pool, amenity center, volleyball court, and dog park. Statement of plan consistency and reasonableness. Any recommended change to the zoning map should be accompanied by a statement explaining how this change is or is not consistent with the comp plan. While the project is largely consistent with blueprint, the one case it's not is it's not dense enough for the comp plan. It's under 4 units an acre. That has to do with the amount of open space. But other than that, it is consistent. And with 3.31 units, it is below the recommended of 4 to 8. The plan is consistent for the following reasons: diversity housing to appeal to different groups, age, income, lifestyle preference, and family situation. Connectivity, improve the connectivity, the robustness, and the resiliency of our transportation system. That collector road connecting Martin Pond and Eagle Rock areas with Wendell Falls, Wendell Valley Boulevard is key. Currently, the most traffic east-west is going on Wendell Falls Parkway. There's not those collectors. This is providing that as the town moves forward. TRC has completed their reviews for the project. The applicant did hold a virtual neighborhood meeting February 27th. Those minutes were included. Staff recommendation, our recommendation is it's inconsistent with the comp plan, but could be considered reasonable since it fulfills the goals of the comp plan noted above, and therefore staff recommends approval. I can answer any questions you have. The applicant is also here as well.
Okay, let's open the public hearing. Are there any questions from the board?
Yeah, a quick one. Did you have a slide, and if you did, can you go back to it, that shows the comp plan and where this is in it?
I don't think we.
And what I'm curious about is just within, I mean, you know, we kind of, in the comp plan, built sort of levels of density. So is that in the middle of it, mixed residential 2, or is it sort of on the periphery of it? Like, would that be on the low end of a mixed residential 2 range for density? Is it on the edge of one of those areas, or is it kind of right in the middle of one?
It's kind of right in the middle. So we have that MR2 classification is all of Wendell Falls, and then a lot of the area between the core of Wendell and Wendell Falls. A lot of it's MR2 or activity centers, which are more dense.
Okay, thank you.
There is an activity center node at the intersection of Martin Pond and Wendell Falls.
Did that come up to these parcels, or is that
No.
farther south?
It's further south.
I have a quick question on this
Okay.
slide.
Mhm.
And just so I understand, so the red is the proposed, but you're saying that two portions of that is currently being constructed, the far
Yes.
left, I guess?
Yeah,
By
about
Wendell
halfway
Falls.
through, yep.
Okay, and then pending approval, we go down, we cut across. The green is the transportation plan,
Correct.
but we've already started construction, not, I guess, consistent with the transportation plan, but it is cutting across.
Yeah, so, when the green line in the north was done, they had that collector go through that existing low-density residential DOT roadway. And taking our collector street, continuing it through properties that the developer doesn't have a control of, and that existing subdivision may not work well, because you're taking a 67-foot right-of-way and merging it into a DOT, maybe 18 feet of pavement, may or may not be maintained, depends if it's private and so we also want the roadway, instead of just connecting Wendell Valley Boulevard with Martin Pond, this alignment allows us to eventually get over to Eagle Rock Road through that additional green line you see to the east at the bottom of the slide.
Fair enough. And then the two, I guess it's two dashes on the actual red line, those are the two separate sections?
Yes, the furthest to the left that you see where it says Piney Falls Drive is Wendell Falls Phase 10. Between the two dashes is Wendell Falls Phase 11. They are both constructed at this time. There are homes getting built in Phase 10.
Brad, can you speak to, as someone that was promised a bridge years ago that finally got built last week, can you speak to the when of this road?
Yeah, I can have the developer talk about their timeline for the project. From a staff perspective, that we can answer is, if approved, they would need to go to construction drawing phase, and once construction drawings are approved, then construction commence. But I'll let them talk about their timeline.
But I guess specifically about that road, like prior to the project being complete, I would assume that the road would be complete, or that they're dedicating.
Are you talking from Jake May Road all the way through? I'm
Right.
assuming to have the functional collector? So Wendell Falls will be subject for those two hash. This developer would build to Martin Pond. The next road is a Duke Power transformer yard that I've already had a conversation with Duke Power about where their easement needs to be for the road. The next properties to Eagle Rock Road are development in conversation right now. Eagle Rise, that was approved several years back, is from Eagle Rock all the way to, I think, one property away from Jake May. So this is all part of that construction that would build that collector, but we don't control when private development gets built.
That's helpful. Thank you.
And one more on the collector while we're at it. I assume it probably is just to facilitate including as many lots in sort of ideal layout, but can you just talk about sort of the two essentially 90-degree angles that are in this one, what I think of as one collector road?
Yes. So let me go back to.
And maybe speak to any conversations or considerations about flat straightening or curving those out so it feels a little, I mean, I get a winding parkway, but hard right angles feel more like stop signs in new streets.
Yeah, so there's.
Not to bring up stop signs.
The design, when we sat down with the applicant and developer and the engineering, there's only so much space to curve that road because they don't control two of the other larger parcels there at the north. And so there was only so much wiggle room to fit a road through there with the environmental features and crossing some streams. And so we sat down, talked about it. It's not an ideal route for a collector. We still would probably love other internal connectivity, but it functions and it works from an emergency standpoint and provides a wider street consistent with Wendell Falls, and so that but there are some turns in it. But it just, when we sat down from an engineering standpoint, our staff, which includes our contract engineering and the applicant, this was probably 3 or 4 different drafts that we finally came up with that worked for that, and it does involve some turns. Ideally, if they controlled those other 2 lots and then Wheat Drive didn't exist, that would be ideal, but then it still only gets us to Martin Pond. This route actually gets us further east, which is really crucial in moving people and cars.
Anything else from the board? Okay, let's hear from the applicant.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
I had a few points I was going to hit, but Brian was he hit pretty much everything I was going to talk about. But just wanted to mention, first off, I'm Steve George. I'm with the CSC Group.
I was getting ready to
Okay.
ask you, thank you.
Yes,
I was
who is
looking
the
at clerk.
applicant and the owner of the property. We are very excited about this project. We think it's a great location and a great, it's worked out to be a great setup here. This is our first project in Wendell. We're planning on a couple more, and so we're very excited about being here. We think it's a great community for our customers. Again, I was going to talk about the issues that I was going to highlight with the connectivity of the roadways and the utilities, bringing everything over to Martin Pond, which is very critical to the town, as I know. The bike lanes and the greenway connections also that we built into the entire plan will make the entire area much more connected from walkers and bikers. As they've talked about, the plan meets or exceeds all of the town development requirements. And the plan went through several revisions, as Brian mentioned, that implemented many of the suggestions from both the planning staff and the planning board that we put into the plan, which actually made it much, much better in terms of the connectivity and everything that you see. As we discussed, the plan fulfills the projected goals and objectives of the blueprint Wendell 2030, and we believe is the highest and best use of this property. And I'm here for questions. We do have our engineer here also for questions too. And do you want me to address a couple of them that you already brought up?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. Someone asked about the townhome, the roofs. The homeowner association will have a fund that is funded by the monthly payments that will be to replace the roofs in a 20-year, usually it's a 20-year period, so that fund is there for the replacement of those roofs. Okay?
In addition to normal exterior?
Yes, that would be a separate fund, yes. The timeline for the collector, this project will, by the time we get CDs done, get development done, I mean, houses will start going, we'll probably start developing late, if it's approved, in late 2024, somewhere in there, with people moving in 2025, starting to move in 2025. You figure about 100 a year, so it'll probably be a 5-year project once homeowners start moving in. So it will go to 2029, somewhere in there. The collector road, one of the first things we do is the amenity center, which is on the collector road. So that collector road will be connected by that first, I think it's the second or third phase, will be connected in there. But it definitely will be completed by the end of the project. Yes.
Any other questions from the board?
So you said that there'd be a fund for the HOA. So do you anticipate each separate owner paying into that fund?
Yes, yeah.
Do you imagine as many separate owners as you do parcels?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Do you imagine as many separate owners as you do parcels?
Yes,
Thank
usually, yes, yeah.
Did you have a timeline question a moment ago, someone?
I think you got it in that last one.
Okay,
Got that, I think.
okay.
I do have a couple quick questions on
Okay.
conditions. Number 2, the 155th CO for your amenities. What is the significance of 155?
There's really no magic number to that, other than, as we were talking with staff, we obviously want that completed at some time. You know, we don't want it right at the end of the project, that sort of thing. So the 155 gives us a start to get some of the homeowners moved in as we're building that facility. That seemed about the right number, but there's no real I can't give you a real magic number to that, yeah.
And I'm not trying to trap you there,
No.
it just, I hear often that 150 is kind of the magic number for a pool.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if that 155 lines up with that, but then the presentation said it was after phase 4. With as many phases as you have, could it potentially be after phase 3?
Yes, and it's very likely it will, because again, it'll be started before then. We give ourselves a little wiggle room, quite frankly, on that.
And then I have, we always talk about diversifying housing.
Mhm.
Without, any presentation on renderings, floor plans, whatever, how is this project, how do you stand out, or how do you separate yourself from other projects that have come before us?
Well, it will be, it's diversified internally, because we have, townhomes, 2 different kinds of single family, and we are gonna have rear-loaded and front-loaded, that sort of thing like that, different garage sizes, that sort of thing. So it'll be different in terms of the product. If you're comparing it to new subdivisions around it, it'll probably be fairly similar. I mean, that's what the market is, quite frankly, and that's why that type housing is built. It will look different slightly, because the architecture will be slightly different, but generally it'll be very similar.
Yeah, and since this is your first project here, we don't have past history. And so that's why I asked the question, just, this is your first swing at it, so, what does it look like? Because it's not, 80 units.
Right.
It's a lot. So,
Right.
Okay.
A quick question.
Do you have, go ahead.
Yeah, I always gotta ask about the parking. There's only 80 spots for all 500 plus residents there. So in other words, when they have guests and people coming over, where's everyone gonna park? 'Cause you can't park on a road, right? HOA, you're not allowed to park on the roads there?
Not on certain of the roads, I know that.
There is-
Can I call on my engineer to start answering some of these? Answer that call. You're getting into an area that I can't actually address.
I was asked that 'cause like driveways, make sure they're at least 20 feet long, 'cause if full-size trucks can't fit in with the sidewalk there, and, are the garages big enough to hold a full-size truck? And
Correct. So, I believe there are some, not on all the alleys, not all the alleys, but on some of the main collector roads, there's a couple of on-street parking, parallel parking spots, and then the amenity center, there's, I think, 82 spots, or 80 or 82 spots. So, as far as the parking requirements, we were following the UDO, and I think we were a little bit over, as far as the requirements are concerned about that, so.
yeah, in order to requirements, but it'd be nice to see maybe one less parking, more parking, 'cause, birthdays, people are living there, you're gonna wanna have celebrations for Christmas and Thanksgiving and things, just something to think about,
Okay. Yeah.
adding in somewhere.
Phil, do you have a number in mind? Like, is there a number?
At least, I would say, you got 500, let's just say 500 residents, at least, half, 250 parking spots in the development.
Okay. That's helpful. We should probably have a conversation about UDO on that.
Yeah.
I'm gonna ask my previous question a little more directly, and I think this will be for the developer. Previously, we've looked at, similar developments. My current neighbor actually lived in, the first, townhome of a similar development. And prior to, the rest of those going onto the market, they were all sold in one lump sum, to one other entity, which made my now neighbor, the minority shareholder with the second largest corporation around. I know I asked my question before, I think you understood my question, but I want to be transparent about that. You don't have any intention to sell to one lump sum. Your intention is to have just as many separate homeowners as you have parcels?
Yes, yeah, this is to be a for sale, we're not talking about for rent or anything like that, no, and with an investor group at all, no, this is to be for sale to individual homeowners. Yeah,
Thank you,
that's the
sir, I
plan.
appreciate
Yep,
that.
yep.
That's all I have, Madam Mayor.
What,
Question?
what size were the garages again? Were they big enough for full-size trucks? Did you say how deep they were, like 27 feet by 30?
I don't recall off the top of my head.
Yeah,
Because you said engineer knows.
they vary a little bit, but
Okay.
you can fit it, they're 20 feet deep, so generally you can fit a full size, unless you've got a monster truck, obviously,
Yeah.
And the driveways are designed so that you have a car out, you can have two cars out front.
Two cars in
also.
the
Yeah,
driveway?
Yeah, yeah.
Just curious, because we had the problem in Wendell Falls, just a full-size Ford F-150 truck, about that close to the sheetrock in front, and
Yeah,
about that
well,
much in the back.
they're
You
probably
can't
gonna be
walk around
tight.
the back if you got the door down.
Yeah.
So, just curious,
No,
but it does matter, being able to park your cars and stuff in there.
It becomes an enforcement issue for the town.
If it's only 3 feet,
as well,
at 3 feet,
down the road.
no.
Yeah.
All right, any other questions? You can always have some more if you need to. All right, is there anyone here with us tonight that would like to speak? For or against? You can come to the podium, give us your name and address, and you have 5 minutes to speak. Watch the lights. They start off green and then yellow and red.
Good evening. My name is Lee House. I live on 1508 Poppy's Pond Path, right in the middle of all this, pretty much. We chose to move here on this acreage because we wanted to be on land, not in a development. So we thought it'd be better for our children and grandchildren.
Pull this closer to your, there you go, thank you.
I live down a half-mile path right now to access my home. I will be required to go the length of the development to get out. I believe that lower density houses would be better for our community this time. Should we consider conserving, preserving, and protecting biodiversity for our future families? The existing roads right now are so congested, it's crazy. Apartment complexes all around us, you know, townhouses, new developments all around that area. So I just think we should slow down till we have the roads and the infrastructure. The first responders are gonna have trouble getting around all this. Consider what's like at 5 o'clock in the evening to get into Wendell, get out of Wendell. I'm outside of Wendell right now, and it's getting bad. So I'd just like to see a little planning. Again, where I live, it's very rural. No, nothing's around me right now, other than another neighbor that used to be my son. Now, on the Flashers, they have moved in. That road's gonna be right in front of their property. I mean, right in front of their property. Right now, this is just an open field. We're being closed in. We don't like it. That's all I got to say. Thank you.
Shoot, the ones right in there.
I guess so. All right, is there anyone else?
I'll just show you. So her parcel is just south of that Wendell Falls, and it's that square where the street ends. So she has Wendell Falls to the west, Phase 11, and this
Okay.
development to the east and south.
Do you have a cursor there, sir?
I don't. I was looking for the cursor. I don't see it.
All right,
Hold on. Oh, right here's her parcel.
okay.
Thank you, Smith.
So she has access currently
Yes,
where?
it's a
To which
it's not a road, it's kind of a dirt,
To Martin Pond?
yes, that goes out to Martin
So a
Pond.
straight line to Martin Pond?
Follow her path with the cursor so I can see that. I'm just curious.
Yeah, so it's very similar out to where the road would be
Okay,
built for the
okay.
development. So it's Poppy's Pond Path is here, and then it hits Petunia Lane, and where
So
you
to
see
be connecting her to that road, that new road there.
Mhm.
So instead of a path, there's a road now.
Yes, there will be a town street, yep.
Yeah, I'll let you, you have a little bit of time left, so just real quickly.
the concern where that path ends, the road ends to my place, my house, it's gonna be right there in my corner lot, a corner of my lot. So, any privacy you have now will be gone. You see what I'm saying?
Are you
Where
putting
you-
any buffer stuff around?
Well, please.
Do you have an existing, so I guess my question is, whose land are you driving on today when you leave your property? Like, do you
I
have?
haven't own an easement out of the property.
Okay, so we're converting an existing easement into a public
Yes,
road?
yes,
Okay. That's helpful, thank you.
thank you.
Thank you. All right, anyone else? All right, we'll close the public hearing.
Did the developer give her any kind of buffer around her house, like a
Yeah, they have a
fence or
20,
anything?
there's a 20-foot type B buffer around the whole property, the whole site. And then there are some open space with ponds for stormwater and things like that as well, but 20 foot's the minimum
Around the development.
around the whole development. Yep.
Including her spot right there?
Yes.
So it would, yeah.
Madam Mayor, I move we approve the proposed annexation and rezoning request and make a motion to adopt the attached ordinance.
All right, we have a motion to approve the proposed annexation and rezoning request and adopt the ordinance, attached ordinance. Is there any discussion on the motion?
Can we, move up amenities following phase 3?
I'm certainly agreeable to that if the developer is.
So we're gonna change what the condition, what number was that?
That was,
Condition 2. Was that or?
number 2, that's correct.
Okay.
Well, while we're all working on conditions and playing nicely, would you mind adding my condition to that? It's for, Mr. George.
Okay, I'm sorry, which question?
So, Joe would like to see the amenities all added prior to
okay, that's what I
phase.
say.
Prior to 4, completion of, 3, end of 3.
Completion of phase 3, right?
Yeah, yes, we will agree to changing number 2 to after phase 3, yes.
Okay. And now, Commissioner
At the
Joyner?
completion of phase 3, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so now,
4, okay, what's your?
I, your wonderful friend that made the motion to approve your project, would like you to include the statement you just made to me that you intend this to be, not build to rent, or however you want to phrase that. I'm not the,
Yeah, I mean, the plan is not to sell to an investor group, okay?
however you want to phrase that,
Yeah,
I'm fine
okay.
with making that the condition, sir.
The condition can say that we do not plan on sending, I'm trying to think, how do I say that best? Because an investor might come in and buy 2 units,
Yeah.
but we're not planning on selling in
Well,
bulk to an investor group in any part of the project.
Brian, do we have a previous condition that we could use, that you used in other?
The previous condition that we had was, it said it would not be a build for rent, it would, community.
And that sounds very in line with what we're discussing, and I would argue that build-for-rent community wasn't defined in those conditions, so I think it's an idea we're trying to get after, not a loyalty test here.
Okay, yeah, and we can definitely state that it is not to be a build-to-rent community.
Thank you, sir.
Absolutely.
Well, with those conditions, Madam Mayor, I would amend my motion to reflect those 2 conditions and submit the motion again to approve the annexation and rezoning and to adopt the attached ordinance.
With
With
the
the,
change of number 2 to move the amenities up to completion of phase 3, and the, statement that will not be sold to, it's not a build-for-rent community.
yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right, is there any discussion on the motion? All in favor?
Nay.
Anyone opposed? Okay, so 3-1. All right. Let's take a 10-minute recess.
Madam Mayor, before we do that, quick
Yep.
question. We encouraged people that applied for our citizen board to be here early tonight to potentially speak with the board. Since we were not here in a timely fashion, can we take the next
We
minutes
can
to
let that-
accomplish that as well?
Accomplish that as well. I've been trying to take one around 9.
Okay.
So we'll do that, and that will serve that purpose as well. So we'll reconvene at 9:10.
You don't wanna stay all night?
My wife will kill me, I'll see you just a minute. Sorry.
Well, we don't want anybody to die.
Okay. Let's come back to order. We went over minutes, I apologize, but people here that are interested in serving on citizen board, so we need to hear from them. All right, let's go to item 5B. It's a public hearing on a zoning text amendment, ZTA 23-04, to UDO section 4.5B2, commercial mixed-use civic and institutional fences. Ms. Griffin.
Good evening. Currently, UDO section 4.5B2 allows for 8-foot fences in the side and rear yards for commercial mixed-use civic and institutional buildings. While this height is appropriate for most uses, it's not always appropriate for athletic fields and recreation facilities. The amendment language does provide some flexibility, and you'll see the amendment language below in the bold and italics. But just as some background, different fence heights for different activities, pickleball 4 to 10 feet, tennis 10 feet, basketball 10 feet, baseball backstop is approximately 25 feet. Standard golf driving range, the fence and net might be 60 to 80 feet, while something like a Topgolf or Drive Shack is a 150-foot tall net. And currently, like I said, we are allowing for 8-foot fences, which doesn't appropriately allow for basketball or baseball and some of these other activities that we would want to have. So we would propose amending 4.5B2 to add the sentence that you see in bold and italics: for recreation uses, including athletic fields, fences may be of a height sufficient to accommodate activities proposed for an outdoor space or field. That way there is some flexibility based on the activity that is being proposed. At the May 15th Planning Board meeting, the Planning Board voted 7-0 on the motion to recommend approval of this text amendment, and you see who voted for and against there as well. Any recommended change to the zoning text should be accompanied by a statement explaining how the change is consistent with the comprehensive plan, Blueprint Wendell 2030. This meets 2 of the goals: growth management GM 3.3 to amend or rewrite the Unified Development Ordinance, and development design DD1 goal, strengthen design standards for mixed use and non-residential development in key growth areas. That being said, staff does recommend approval of the proposed text amendment. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
All right, let's open the public hearing. Any questions from the board?
I know that Commissioner Joyner probably wants to ask this too, but I kind of checked out at the top. I heard Topgolf, and then that was kind of it for me, so.
No, ma'am.
All right, is there anyone here that would like to speak for or against the text amendment? Okay, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. What's your pleasure, gentlemen?
Madam Mayor, I move we approve the zoning text amendment to UDO section 4.52, commercial use, civic, and institutional fences.
All right, so we have a motion to approve the zoning text amendment. Is there any discussion on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank y'all. Item 5C is a public hearing on the text amendment ZTA 23-05 to UDO section 8.8, 8.12, and Appendix F related to street trees. Mr. Coates.
Yep. Good evening, Mayor and board members. This next public hearing is related to zoning text amendment, UDO sections 8.8, 8.112, and Appendix F related to our street trees. Late last summer, after several street trees were removed in our jurisdiction, planning staff began to evaluate the town's approved street tree list. The town's current residential street tree list, Appendix F, was codified with the UDO's passage in 2008, and we're not aware of any adjustments since then. The town did contract with landscape architects at an engineering firm of Withers Ravenel that we have on contract. They do have a staff member here tonight, Nicole, to help answer any questions as well, to evaluate the town's current list and make recommendations for any suggested additions or deletions. And just to give you a little background, Withers Ravenel was also asked to evaluate trees that would be suitable for both our standard 7-foot planting strip. Town standard now is curb to sidewalk 7 feet, and the street tree goes in that public right-of-way and is in a 7-foot planting strip. Wendell Falls community was approved with a 5-foot street tree easement that starts at the back of the sidewalk and goes 5 feet into the front yards of the homes. That's the only neighborhood that has that standard. So when we look at street trees, we wanted to make sure that they were suitable for different environments. So a 7-foot planting strip and a 5-foot, there's 2 feet less for the tree in Wendell Falls. And so we wanted to be very cautious and strategic and look at those sizes of those trees. The town standard is in the planting strip that is in the right-of-way, making the trees the responsibility of the town. Along DOT roads, trees are typically behind the sidewalk but still within the right-of-way. In Wendell Falls, they are in the front yard of homes in an easement. The proposed street tree list is included as an attachment and details the suitability notes for planting and pruning. Chapter 8, we are striking in Appendix F, which includes spacing and planting strip width requirements. Planting strips are permitted and encouraged to be designed as bioswales to substitute for conventional pipe storm drainage. Chapter 8.112, we're using, instead of 35 feet or greater, approximately 35 for the mature crown, in a spread of approximately 30 to give us some leeway in some smaller trees that are more appropriate for that 5-foot street tree easement. The canopy trees are required in all of our developments on a 40-foot spacing, and must be a minimum 8 feet high and have a minimum 2-inch caliper measured 6 inches above grade. And then Amendment 3, which is to replace our current Appendix F, which is attached with revised Appendix F, which I will show you here in a moment. So, new Appendix F that we're proposing looks a lot different and gives people estimates of the height, the canopy, and kind of some notes on suitability. So, for example, just to give you the American hop hornbeam, the N means it's native. The botanical name, the height of the tree at full build out, and the canopy. And then suitability notes. Front yard easement tolerates pruning well. That means it is appropriate for that 5-foot street tree easement and also our 7-foot planting strip. So this is the proposed list. We did work with Withers. We did some on-site visits to look at the health of our trees. You will notice in canopy trees, quite a few, the red maple in my yard is no longer on our list. There's a lot of disease-prone issues with a lot of maple trees, and so there are some trees that are pre-existing that are just not recommended at this time. Also, and when we look at diversity of our trees, anytime a tree is more than, I think, 5% of your total tree canopy, if disease does hit those, you could lose a large amount at once, and so we are trying to get a mix of trees. You will see in the understory tree, which understory trees can be used as street trees if it's in underneath power lines, where Duke does not want a mature tree, they want a more understory. And so there are a mixture, but these are just street trees. Buffer trees and other things, still have our other list, but this is just street trees. I can field any questions that you have. Planning board did recommend 7-0 on a motion to recommend approval. Some of the notes from that was they were actually glad we were looking at it because a lot of municipalities are having some issues with trees due to disease, and so trying to be proactive. Planning board did vote in favor. I can field any questions that you do have.
All right, so open the public hearing. Any questions from the board?
I just have a comment.
Yep.
I'm also share the planning board's perspective that I'm glad that the issue's being visited. It's been several years, as you said, since this list has been looked at by this board in a comprehensive way, so just thank y'all, staff. I know it's something y'all heard from the board and appreciate you doing it. The one thing that I would say is, I think in the United States and in the Southeast, we've got a really significant problem happening with pollinators. I think we've talked about that a lot at this board. The mayor has been a consistent supporter of the mayor's Monarch Pledge. And I think that while I'm not interested at all in passing laws that say you can't plant, or you have to plant any kind of tree as a private citizen, I do think that in our right-of-ways and within these regulatory schemes that we've set up and folks have voluntarily purchased a home in, or a developer has imposed on their development, I think that's the place that we can offer a stick to support pollinator habitat. And ultimately, all that means is native plants. And I think that that's something that more and more people all over the country are talking about right now. We would not be in a small, or we wouldn't be on our own if we narrowed this list down to really focus in on when folks are planting trees that they are required by law to plant for the street tree ordinance, that they plant native plants. There's several, they're already noted on this list. You can see which ones are native and native cultivars. Even native cultivars I don't have any serious concerns with those, but I think that the town further incentivizing the proliferation of non-native plants is not something that I would support, and I would ask that we eliminate the non-native plants from this list.
I actually had a conversation with you about that. Is that not one of you? And apparently there's some difficulty obtaining the large number if you have to limit it to native, so.
Yeah, and I can just speak to that a little bit. I mean, I'm a pretty integral part of statewide conversations happening right now throughout all state agencies, and it is while that concern does come about from time to time, the industry is growing. I think that it makes sense for us to be part of incentivizing the growth of an industry that I think would be really important to our state. I don't think that the concerns are irrational. I think that this is a carrot that we have to provide in the trees that we require to be planted, or the trees that we are planting and owning as a town. People can do what they want on their own property, in our right-of-way, in the easements at Wendell Falls, and that's sort of the other exception that are required. I think it just makes sense for us to set the standard. I know something else we've talked about with staff, and it's a separate conversation from this, is just implementing a native-only policy for all town plantings. I think this is one component of that. I think a very visible component, because trees are very big and very visible. So I think there's a valid case to be made either way. I think it's pushing an industry and pushing a boundary a little bit, and I don't mean to talk over staff or others that want to offer feedback. I think there probably are compelling other cases. I just do want to acknowledge that they exist and disagree.
Hello, Nicole Steele, Withers Ravenel. I totally agree with you. We've got to really support our native species in order to push the industry in a more positive direction from a sustainability and ecological standpoint. I think with street trees in particular is where we've run into some challenges with their longevity and just the abuse that they take, quite frankly, as a street tree versus a tree in a buffer. That's where some of the cultivars are helpful, or they've been selected to withstand the abuse, so to speak, in the more urban areas. And so I think there's a balance to strike there. We tried to provide a good number of native trees that we felt were reliable, that the town would not be needing to replace every few years. And so to your point about pollinators, I personally have a native garden out front of my yard, or in my yard, and really focusing on supporting the pollinators from a perennial standpoint. Not sure what else I can offer with you other than to strike that balance between the native and non-native to meet the street tree requirements and challenges.
Any other comments from the board? Okay. Is there anyone from the public who would like to speak?
My name is Lucius Jones, and I live at 410 Selma Road, and I sit here all night and listen, so I just had to say something. The problem, part of the problem that our town manager has today with his sidewalks is because we planted trees too close to the sidewalks and the streets. And I see it coming all the time now when we're still trying to put trees in places where they shouldn't be put. These trees are going to, I don't care what kind of trees you got. I know you got all kinds, and I'm not familiar with the pollination or anything else. But I just know that when you plant trees too close to concrete, there's a problem. And trees and concrete don't go together. So I don't mind, and I have to plant trees in people's yards when I build the houses. But the business of putting a tree between the street and the sidewalk doesn't make any sense. You're going to eventually, someday, you're going to come back and pay for it. Because we're paying for it right now in Wendell, especially if you want to look up there around the school. Where we have, I mean, those trees grew, but these trees are going to grow. But there's going to be problems. And you know, we may say, well, you got to plant a certain kind of tree. Well, maybe at the time that you're doing it, that kind of tree's not available. Because there are certain trees that sometimes get really hard to get. So just keep that in mind. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Anything else from the board? All right, we'll close the public hearing.
Is staff or board member of the opinion that we could make this I appreciate Commissioner Eamon's comments. And while I love my Japanese maple, it's not a street tree, it's just in my front yard. Is there a middle ground to be found here? Is there a way to understanding that I think a majority of the board supports as many native species and as few non-native species as absolutely possible. Can you guys give us, what's the plan if you know that to be the fact? And you're also giving consideration to, we don't want every project in town to come to a halting stop because we can't fund the tree. That's the middle ground that I'm looking for.
I might suggest on that question, sort of maybe a tiered option of you have to plant a non-native unless and I'm happy to give some staff flexibility in that situation if it makes sense that there's a tree's no native plants available or something like that, or there's some very serious, this is at a intersection where the last one got hit so many times that we need to put something up that's hardier, and that may not exactly be what hardy means in an urban setting, but I get there may be some need for flexibility, but I think the default ought to be native plants.
So would you all be comfortable with if native street tree is required unless you have documentation that you cannot obtain a native, and then you have to go with the other 5 on the list? And we can always, I mean, the UDO is a living, breathing document. So after a couple years, maybe we don't have issues obtaining native and we change it to all, I mean, we can always do an amendment and see how this version works for a while and come back with some results.
Is that good with everyone?
Sounds perfect.
All right. Can we get that in the form of a motion?
Can we get that in the form of the motion?
Appendix F the text language would state a native has to be planted unless documentation that it's unattainable or cannot be obtained, and then you can go with the other 5 on the list. Because 9 out of 15 are native or native cultivar, so.
So like in a timely fashion, so like, it's more than 6 months to get one, you gotta just do it now, do whatever you got, just use what you got, yeah.
Can I offer just a little additional?
Yes, sir.
To avoid less clarity in conversation between the planning director and the development community and citizens. That letter has to be reviewed and approved by the planning director and his or her designee, so that they are the interpreter of that. In my mind, what I see happening with that is, if there's any question, just like we did in this case, we can go to our staff or paid consultant
Right.
and get a professional opinion to determine if a developer's trying to buy 100 trees for a large development like tonight, and they can only find 300 native trees within the time period of their phases. But if they come in with 5 phases and there's only 300 trees now, then over the years, each phase needs to be, so it gives the planning director that flexibility.
So maybe it has less to do with a letter from a developer and more to do with, you have to plant a native species, one of these native plants, unless, with some authority to staff for exceptions for the non-natives, when that's appropriate.
Unless administrative I don't even know, is that a allowed term? Administrative deviation is accepted by the planning director due to availability.
I would just leave it at accepted by the planning director.
Okay.
So, Madam Mayor, I move that we approve the
Zoning text amendment.
zoning text amendment to UDO section 8.8 and 8.2 in Appendix F related to street trees, with the addition of a condition that trees should be planted as native species, and if not, will, unless otherwise approved by the planning director upon request.
Okay. So we have a motion to adopt the zoning text amendment, ZTA 23-05, and to UDO section 8.8, 8.12, and Appendix F related to street trees to require native, unless otherwise approved by the planning director.
Said it beautifully.
Okay. All right. I'm not going to say it again. Is there any discussion on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. That's 4-0. All right, we'll move into our administrative items. Item 6A is appointment to the Downtown Development Committee.
Good evening. So tonight, the board is being asked to appoint 3 members to the Downtown Development Committee. Citizen Advisory Board recruitment began in February of 2023, with the initial application deadline being April 30th. After receiving a very small number of applications, the board decided to open the recruitment period back up to allow for more applications to be received. There are 3 vacancies on this board, 9 applications were received, and there is currently no residency requirement for this board. Applicants were informed of the appointment process and were encouraged to attend tonight's meeting and introduce themselves before the meeting or during the break, if able to. And the board will now vote by ballot, which they will choose 3 and print their name.
Thank you.
Okay, and our 3 new members for the Downtown Development Committee, with term expiring June 30th, 2025, will be Christian Hill, Megan Young, and Ryan Smith. Thank you.
All right, thank you to everyone who's willing to participate and join in with us. We're happy to have you. And thank you to everyone who applied. Item 6B is a resolution ratifying, accepting, and approving the amended charter resolution of Central Pine Regional Council, formerly the Triangle J Council of Governments. Ms. Smith.
Good evening. As the title suggests, Triangle J Council of Governments is requesting action from the board tonight to ratify and accept and approve their amended charter resolution. I'm going to invite Elena Keegan up from Triangle J for a presentation.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. It's great to be here with all of you, and I also have a pollinator garden, so I enjoyed the conversation. So I'm just going to give a little bit of background on the item that's before you tonight for adoption. I know that some of you have been involved with Triangle J in the past. Some of you, this might be a slightly new name or organization. And I'm just going to talk through the background behind our name change as quickly as I can. So we have been around for almost 6 decades, which is quite a long time. We're very excited about that. And we were originally created as the organization that planned RTP, and then we quickly morphed into Triangle J Council of Governments, and that's been our brand ever since then. And several years ago, we identified that our brand really just didn't fit with our organization anymore. We have 47 local government members, many of which do not identify as the Triangle and have not for quite some time, which might be something that your community resonates with. And we really just sort of had a stale brand that didn't match all the work that we were doing. So we entered into a rebranding effort with 3 goals in mind, reflecting our role as it is today. We really strive to be forward-thinking, supporting local government members like your own, doing a better job of marketing our services. I know that Commissioner DeLoach may have trouble sometimes explaining to folks as our delegate what we do in 2 sentences, and so we really strove to find ways to make it easier for you all as board members and other community members to explain what we do as an organization, and to just develop a stronger brand identity. So a little bit about the process. This has gone on since about, it's been spring 2022 until now. We officially asked our board last year during the fiscal year 23 budget process to approve money in that budget to do this rebranding process, and that was approved. And then throughout the summer and spring, we conducted that rebranding process. So we consulted with we conducted an RFP process. We selected a consultant, Carborough Creative, who is fabulous if you ever are in need of branding in any way. They are based out of Carborough, if that connects well to their name. And they did a full audit of our brand and a lot of interviews that we had just conducted with stakeholders, board members, town and county managers through our strategic planning process. So we had just gone through, we coupled it purposefully, gone through a very intense audit of what folks in our communities saw as our purpose, and they used that to create this brand. And then they went through the process of approving it with all of our board members. So we have a board of 47 local government elected officials, 1 from each of our communities. We first presented it to our officers and then brought it all the way through the channels, and it was unanimously approved by all of those steps. And so because we are a membership organization, our charter, in order to be official, has to be adopted by each of our local government boards. When you joined the organization, you adopted this charter, and so you're now being asked to formally adopt it again. I'm also very excited, I may be the only one that's excited about this, that we have 31 of 32, so this slide is outdated. So you, if you adopt, will be the 32 of 32 to make it official. So we will give you as much credit as we can. So in order for it to become official, it's 2/3. We'd obviously hope, and we're still going to try and make sure that we get to 47, but it will become official if you take action, after you take action. And so just an overview of the brand. You all heard the name Central Pines. This is the new name and the new logo. Our rebranding consultants, we really stressed to them that we wanted something that would make us stand out in our region. Triangle and Research Triangle is in a number of organizations, and we often get confused with them, and we really have a lot of communities that just don't identify with being in the Triangle. And so they did extensive research and excitedly brought to us a huge document that talked about the history of the pine tree in our region and, of course, our state. And so it sort of is a nod to who we have been and where we're going. Pine trees are obviously a big part of our history. That's why we're the Tar Heel state. They were involved in the production of tar. They're one of the main sources of lumber today, and we're all growing with huge subdivisions and things like that. And so it sort of is playing to both our past and present. And then our logo has triangles in it to give the nod to the triangle that is still within our region. This is our brand purpose. We are a resource and support hub for local governments, community members, and partners in Central North Carolina. I will not read you all these slides for now. This is sort of a sneak peek of what the brand would look like. We're also redoing our offices, making them the hub for the hub. So they're going to be a space that is fully redesigned, available for local government members to, for free, use our conference room spaces and offices for your staff and your boards to use it as you see fit. And this is just a little bit more of what the brand will look like. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions from the board?
They did already know about it, so I'll defend them if they don't have questions.
Perfect.
I love it. I think it's very exciting.
Thank you. Yes, we do too.
I love the triangles and the pine cone. It's
Yes.
clever. I like it. Catchy.
They did a great job. I
Yeah.
can't take any credit for it. So.
Yeah, that's nice.
Thank you.
All right, gentlemen.
Do you need anything else from me? Okay.
Madam Mayor, I move we approve the resolution ratifying, accepting, and approving the amended charter resolution of Central Pines Regional Council of Government, formerly called, and I probably still will call, Triangle J Council of Governments.
Okay, so we have a motion to adopt the resolution ratifying, accepting, and approving the amended charter resolution of Central Pines Regional Council, formerly the Triangle J Council of Governments. Is there any discussion on the motion? All in
32.
favor?
Aye.
All right, number 32. Great. Thank you for coming tonight. It's nice to see you again. Haven't seen you in a while. Item 6C is the ordinance to amend section 2490, parking in specific places prohibited in the Town of Wendell Code of Ordinances. Mr. Coates.
Yep, good evening, Mayor and board members. Before you tonight is a request from the Edgemont Landing HOA. So our Code of Ordinances 24-90 details areas in town limits where parking is prohibited. In section 19, the streets in the Wendell Falls subdivision are specifically called out. The town has received a request from Edgemont Landings HOA to restrict on-street parking within that neighborhood. The town's current standards and specs call for local roads to contain a 52-foot right-of-way, 27 feet from back to back from one curb to the other. Both subdivisions, currently Wendell Falls has the 50-foot right-of-way with a 27-foot back-to-back, and Edgemont Landing has 28 feet back-to-back. And there are some on-street parking spots beyond the first few phases of Wendell Falls that are woven in throughout the community. The only off-street parking is at the amenity center for the Edgemont Landing community. The proposed revision is to section 2490 of the Code of Ordinances that makes the distinction that on-street parking will be allowed only 5 days prior and 5 days after any holiday recognized by the state of North Carolina. Previously, the Wendell Falls HOA was required to send us a list of dates for the town for the allowed parking on the street. Our preference is following either state holidays or town holidays. We'll standardize this policy across these two subdivisions. So if you were to make a motion to approve the text amendment, we would like consistency with any of the neighborhoods that don't allow it so that the holidays are consistent. From a staff perspective, we've talked to police, and to have different holidays in different neighborhoods would make it really challenging. And so having a consistent list is what our recommendation is. You can see here the proposed text is minimal. It's to add on any public street or right-of-way within the following subdivisions except where designated by legally marked parking spaces. List Wendell Falls, Edgemont Landing, and then on-street parking shall be allowed in these subdivisions 5 days before or 5 days after holidays recognized by the state of North Carolina. parking is permitted during community-wide resident events with prior approval from the town manager or their designee. I know you did at the dais tonight, you did receive a letter that was sent from Chief Staples to the Edgemont Landing residents last year. The HOA members were not able to attend tonight, but we were presenting this request, and we hopefully can answer any questions that you have.
I have a question about the parking on, I'm always in favor of more parking, and just looking at the size of the roads, it's like 27 feet, so would it, just something to think about in the future? Could it be allowed to park on the even side of the road, like all the houses? So you'd be allowed to park on the even side of the road and then leave 26 feet on the other side for fire trucks and everybody else. That way everyone parks on the same side, either it's even or odd side.
So just
like other places that they're doing snow, they want on the even side, odd side, so that way they can plow snow or something, so that in other places, and just something.
So keep in mind, when we say 27 or 28 feet back to back, you've got to remove 2.5 feet on each side for the curb and gutter. So technically, Edgemont Landing has 23 feet of pavement.
That's all you got?
Yeah, and Wendell Falls has 24.
Feet.
But you got to remove that curbing because people can't park on the curb and gutter. I mean, or they should.
So you're going by the other side of the curb.
So pavement to pavement might be 23 or 24 of just pure asphalt. So let's take 2 vehicles, and they each take up 7 feet, so they're 23 minus 14, you're left with less than a fire truck can get through.
That's why you
if
just
people
park
park
on
on
one
both.
side, yeah.
So just for math purposes to explain, I think that helps explain Chief Staples' letter to them is we are having issues
I thought
going.
it was 27 feet from asphalt, because I measured our old roads are 30 feet of actual asphalt, and then there was the curb and gutter. So we're actually 30.
Sure.
Ours are.
The old roads
Yeah.
in Deerfield and stuff?
Oh, yeah. It depends on when the subdivision was built. They're all going to vary in town, but our
Which is something
standard.
to think about, if you wanted parking, just do it on one side of the road, that way you can get down the other side. Fire trucks and,
I was,
I'm gonna get my tape measure out and go
I'm gonna check the weather in other, places later on, but I walked in here with exactly what Commissioner Ternasky's talking about. There are places in my neighborhood, we have members of advisory boards who choose to park their vehicles on the street as a way of traffic calming. That's great until their neighbor across the street decides to do the same thing. I will say 3 things. One, I listen to every police communication that's logged on the internet at night. I hear a whole lot of our PD checking in on Grovemere Lane, a lot of Wendell Falls. And if we want to talk about bad customer service and bad reactions, doing parking enforcement is not the way to make friends. So I appreciate that we're trying to do it. I like the way that you guys have crafted both things together. I am not opposed if understanding that the Wendell Fall or the Edgemont Landing is requesting this. I'm not opposed to this, but our position long-term cannot be that we're going to be traffic cops. We didn't allow ourselves to be traffic cops on Main Street when there was a parking ordinance. I don't want to get ourselves in the business of being traffic cops there. I'd be fine with what we have tonight. I appreciate the work you've done, but I would ask that we look at options like what Commissioner Ternasky's talking about, where you're parking on one side of the street seems to be an easy rule for everybody. We can blast that town-wide, but that makes it so that at least if I'm the fire truck and I'm coming down the street, I know which side of the road I'm working with.
instead of having weaving.
Right. So those would be my thoughts. I certainly, it looks like Edgemont Landing. This is what they want, and I certainly appreciate that. Knowing the size and scope of Edgemont Landing, it's much different than Wendell Falls. So like I see our problem at Wendell Falls is going to continue to grow. Edgemont Landing is 9 streets that we can address. But I would like for us to figure out what we do moving forward on all of our streets about that.
Without them being here to present or discuss, I guess my question would be, what have they done to get to this point? I mean, clearly there's a letter here from Chief Staples, but, you know, is this something that they've discussed with the homeowners, and the homeowners, you know, 90% of the homeowners are asking for this, or is this just because in my mind, Wendell Falls, there is additional parking available. In Edgemont Landing, there is no additional parking available. So where are you going to park other than in the street? I agree it needs, you know, one side of the street, whatever that needs to be, but has that been addressed before they came to us and said, hey, we want you to eliminate street parking for us?
That's something they even discussed.
The only information that was relayed to staff, when we got Chief Staples' letter today, I'm not sure, I know they had meetings on it, but I'm not sure of the full details, and can't say they held community meeting, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
We could.
Because for me, if it's a request from us, who
Yeah.
is us? Is it the
So-
president of the HOA? Is it 5 board members of the HOA that don't speak for the entirety?
So I know the HOA president was not able to attend. She had something come up for Monday nights in the month of June. So we could, if you all wanted to, get more information before you make a decision.
Can I recommend the board table this for several different
You
reasons?
don't even have to give us the reasons, you just tell us the date you want us to table it to, and that's exactly what we'll do, sir.
Can I talk real quick before you make the motion?
Oh, yes.
I'll make it real fast, but only just to say that I came in ready to vehemently oppose to this whole proposal, and I just want to thank Commissioner Tarnaski for providing some moderation to my extremism and helping me find a very reasonable, I think a reasonable proposal as a compromise. And so I think we're all vaguely on the same
Yeah,
page and happy to support a motion to that
I'd
effect.
like staff to have sufficient time to evaluate that. Each of these developments have different mitigating factors, to your point of
Continuity throughout town.
yeah, there's
Yeah.
some solutions in Wendell Falls that aren't available in Edgemont Landing with additional marked parking on a lot of wider streets. There are restrictive covenants in place that our ordinance was tailored to prevent towing from public streets, which would not be permitted from the initial adoption, if you recall back to that, the board members that were here. So there's some solutions for Wendell Falls that are different options than the parking on one side of the street that sounds like a good option for Edgemont Landing. And I think we can, if we have sufficient time, second July meeting, then we can evaluate those options and bring those back and discuss them with you prior to you taking action.
So we need a motion to table till second meeting July.
So moved.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right. Proposal for architectural and engineering services for the Pleasant Grove Community Center and Neighborhood Plan between the Town of Wendell and Andre Johnson Architect.
All right. Exciting times.
Yes.
Board willing, we're ready to get moving. The board approved the ranking prior of the architects with Andre Johnson, authorized the town manager to negotiate an agreement. The proposed agreement was provided to you in your packet. The fee estimate came in a little higher than anticipated. That has been worked down by the architect with his engineering consultant based on conversation with staff. The scope of work was provided to Pastor Bell with Pleasant Grove, reviewed. Andre Johnson, Pastor Bell, and I had a meeting and talked through it and what the numbers and scope of work meant to make sure that was consistent with what we expected. One thing that Pastor Bell, shrewd attorney that he is on his day job, asked about language in the AIA contract to include wording that if the scope costs related to engineering and some of the environmental work aren't needed specifically after they get in with the initial evaluation, that inure to the benefit of the town, so it can reduce that number down, and Andre said that'd be fine to make sure that was in the AIA language. So you're looking at what's hopefully a worst-case number there. Another point there is this is 2 projects over multiple years, and one of those projects literally has a couple different scopes. There's the initial design of the community center, the building, and then there's construction management by the architect, much like Gensler has done with the town hall building. They've continued to work through with the owner's project manager and the contractor to make sure that vision gets built to the architect's design. And so there's 12 months that's in the construction part of a contract, if you will, built into this. And then the second project being that neighborhood plan that talks to the broader Pleasant Grove community about service gaps and possibilities of being part of the town and what services they would want to see and make sure that they're in place. So there's several moving pieces to that number. 750 was initially thought about being somewhere 8 to 10% of project cost. When you back out the construction services and the planning, that does fit for an $8 million capital project. Not without the architect going into the building to determine if that's high or low at this point. So staff is comfortable, or I'm comfortable, with the number provided. Happy to answer any questions you might have had from reviewing the document. Probably the question on everybody's mind was, when does the design start? And the first stakeholder meeting, architect reports by second or third week of July. So about a month from now, we'll kick off and start going and begin an exciting process.
All right, any
Board
questions
will.
from the board?
Should have been an architect. I move to accept the proposal for professional and architectural engineering services between the town of Wendell and Andre Johnson Architect, and authorize the town manager to sign the agreement.
All right, thank you. We have a motion to accept the proposal for professional architectural and engineering services between the town of Wendell and Andre Johnson Architect, and authorize the town manager to sign the agreement. Is there any discussion on the motion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right. Update on board committees by town board members. Wendell Volunteer Fire Department, Commissioner Joyner.
Madam Mayor, I'm unable, the fire department board met this week with no items of substance on their agenda, and I was unable to attend.
Okay. Triangle J, newly named Council of Governments, Commissioner Deloach.
We'll change that next time.
Yeah.
Number 32, so I think that's, thank to Alana for being here tonight. You know, I've discussed it in previous commissioner reports back that this was going on, so I appreciate her being here. Nothing of extreme urgency or substance otherwise.
Okay, thank you. Moving into our commissioners' comments, let's go back to Commissioner Joyner.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This has already been a busy week. Wendell works well when Wendell works together, and I'll just say that for the evening. I look forward to seeing all of Wendell this Friday night on Main Street for Meet on Main, and look forward to everybody having wonderful weather that I know we're going to have, and would just thank the board and members of the public for accommodating our tardiness this evening. I certainly appreciate that.
All right.
Nothing else tonight, Mayor.
Commissioner Tornaski?
No comment tonight, Mayor.
Commissioner Deloach?
The only thing I'll say is that I'm a phone a friend for a lot of things. Trees is not one of them, but I did learn a lot tonight about trees. So thank you to Commissioner Eaton for that. Social District has cranked up as well, so exciting things happening in Wendell. Come see us downtown this weekend.
Real quickly, I can't leave without telling you, East Wake High School this Friday, Wednesday morning is going to be on the Today Show live at about 7:30-ish, And they would really love it if members of the community would come and be there. So I'm sure I can count on the 4 of you at 7 a.m. This is for their part of their series that the Today Show is doing called Graduation Nation, and they are focusing on Eastway High School. So that's really cool. It's a great chance to celebrate our school, hopefully newly minted magnet school. So there's a lot of great things happening there, and I really hope people will participate. They would love for you to bring signs, and we want to pack the bleachers at the football field. So please come out and participate with that. Quick reminder about Meet on Main, Friday nights, the Band of Oz. It should be really great. The event begins at 5, food trucks, Kids Zone, the music from 6:30 to 9:30. And I'll be down there selling tickets, so come see me, or tokens. And also, I want to speak real quickly to the comment that was made tonight about roads. And I know that people would love roads to come, and they would love for us, I hear this a lot, that we would love the roads to be there before the development comes. And, you know, gosh, I would love that too. But that's unfortunately just not the way it works. Development comes and that brings roads, and roads follow development. And so, essentially, and sometimes unfortunately, we're always playing catch up on that route, but there's really not a lot we can do about that. We do things within our process where we trigger road improvements, and sometimes those happen sooner, but the vast majority of roads come after the need is established. So I don't want people to think that we're just not taking care of that. We're just ignoring those needs. So, and I heard it again tonight here. All right, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All right, we're adjourned.